And I should say we'll try to get through. There's lots of questions, which is wonderful. And so if you could try and keep them succinct and brief, that would be marvelous, so that we can get through as many as possible.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Dr. Mate. I wondered, and I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer this, but I wondered what method you used to recover from your own self-confessed addiction, if you used a 12-step program, or if you care to share that.
Yes. I attended a 12-step group once or twice, but I didn't have the discipline to keep going. What method? I don't know that there was one method, you know, but it was really, now look, by the way, it was 2 years ago this June that I was in London speaking to a lot of people, including to the Haru Academy. And my wife was with me. And this work that the shopping addiction I've got over years ago, but the work addiction, 2 years ago I was in London and I was giving these talks and I was being my usual, you know, I like to think articulate and intuitive and communicative self on stage. But back in the hotel room with my wife, I was irritated because I was working too much. I'd taken on too much. And my wife said to me, listen, friend, you've written a book called When the Body Says No. No, you better write one called When the Wife Says No. Because I'm not putting up with this anymore. I will not have my holidays ruined because of your workaholism. So partly it had to do with, do I want to honor my relationship? In fact, to stay in it. So I had some incentive after 49 years at that point of marriage. And, but really it's been a process of deepening my awareness of myself, of separating from my ego. And that meant for me, counseling, deep reading, self-reflection, yoga, taking care of my body physically and nutritionally, all that. Each of my books that I've written have been from myself. So the more I immersed myself in this material, the clearer I became within myself. There's no simple answer I can give you. I can also tell you that I've also done some really helpful work with traditional healing methods, including psychedelic substances, and that's also helped. I can't point to one thing that has been the key. It's all of that. But fundamentally what it was is I've had a deep commitment. I can acknowledge myself for that. Sometimes I had to drag myself kicking and screaming, but I had a deep commitment to transformation and to self-awareness.
I should jump in at that moment and say I think one of the experiences could have been with a guest we have coming up on the How To Academy program on March the 24th, the Temple of Life.
Well, yeah, the Temple of the Way of Light.
Temple of the Way of Life.
Yeah, that's in Peru, and it's an ayahuasca healing center with Matthew Waterston, and a good friend of mine. And yes, I had a deep experience there 2 years ago that I'll tell you about in some other context.
Well, we hope.
In fact, I went to the Temple of the Way of Light right from London under the circumstances I just mentioned. And when I got there, the shaman said, buddy, you can't lead anybody else. You're too stressed yourself. You better just work on you. That's what happened. These traditional healers read me like a book. They didn't know a thing about me. Matthew is free to talk about that if he wants to.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Mate. I am an MD, and your work has influenced my practice. And I was working as a medical school professor as well, and would turn all my students onto your videos and books. My question is personal. I struggle with an immense amount of dissociation, and I think I have maybe become involuntarily addicted to the endogenous opioids in my brain. And I feel very disconnected from myself. And I do use psychedelics also, but I still find myself kind of struggling to connect with the self all the time because of this dissociation. And I was wondering if you have any ideas on how to break it.
Well, yes. So the first question is, why would anybody dissociate? Not that you do it, by the way. You don't dissociate. Your brain does it automatically. I mean, do you decide, Miriam, do you decide all of a sudden, I'm going to dissociate now?
Not at all. That's one of the most frustrating things, is that it just happens so automatically.
Okay, now, no, don't think about yourself. Well, why would any human being, why would any human organism do that?
Yeah, I guess it's just overwhelm. It's a response to just not being able to cope with whatever's in front of you.
Exactly. And its origins are always in childhood, when the brain is developing. So that, like, for example, my ADHD, my tuning out, which is a milder form of dissociation, was a response to circumstances that as an infant I couldn't handle. So that the brain tunes out as a way of defending itself from the overwhelming stress. And it's doing so when the brain is developing, when all the circuits are being laid down. So the tuning out, the dissociation, actually becomes wired in. And later on, it takes very little to trigger it. So what I would invite you to do is to send me an email, and I'm giving How to Academy permission to share my personal email with you. This is professional courtesy here. And if you want to write to me, I'll get back to you. I won't take the time, nor do we have it, for me to delve into this question with you. But in recompense for you recommending my books to your students, I'll see what I can do to get back to you. Is that fair enough?
That's an absolute honor. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Without sounding rude, again, if I could emphasize, if you could keep a question brief so that I can get through as many as possible. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to ask, I've come to recognize my deep sensitivity as well as in my family through my healing of trauma and coming into authenticity. So I was curious what you recommend to help prevent trauma when deeply sensitive.
Well, you know, it's a bit like asking, how do you prevent trauma when deeply Black in a racist society? Because this society does not honor vulnerability. In fact, it kind of shuns it. You're being weak. How many times have you been told, don't be so sensitive?
Hundreds.
You might as well have been told, now what color are you a brunette or you're blonde? I can't quite tell.
Reddish, well, dyed, but I have green eyes.
Okay, well, people might as well tell you, don't be so green-eyed. It's just your nature. No, nobody ever told you not to be green-eyed, but they told you not to be sensitive, which is as much part of your nature as the green eyes are. So in this society, sensitive people are hurt. Now, how do you prevent it? Is if the parents had the wherewithal and the awareness and the teachers to recognize sensitivity and to actually honor it and to cherish it, because in traditional societies, the sensitive people were the shamans, they were the healers. In our society, don't be so weak. Don't be such a namby-pamby. Don't be so sensitive. So how do you prevent it? You can't as an individual, as a fetus, as an infant, as a small child, you can't. You can heal from the traumas, but you could hardly have prevented it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to ask a question that somebody would rather remain anonymous, but I think it's important. They said that their mother was an alcoholic for years and was ostracized from the family. She's been sober for years, but it's still a taboo subject. She's still ostracized. And it fits in with so much of what you talk about and what you advise, that she wonders, you know, your ideas and thoughts on how to overcome that taboo.
Well, I'd have to know much more about the situation. She may or may not be able to overcome it, because it may be a deeply held prejudice that the family is not willing to give up, precisely because her own journey was so painful for them, because it reminded them too much of what they don't really want to know, which is their own dysfunctions. Her addiction, her alcoholism, was not her individual manifestation. She was the canary in the mine, manifesting the dysfunction, the multi-generational, non-culpable dysfunction of the entire family. So the family may or may not be ready to confront that in themselves. Having said that, assuming that the family is some way open, she could actually go to the family without blame, if she's ready to do that, if she can do this authentically and say, you know what, I really get that my behavior was so painful for you all, that you all love me so much. You couldn't handle it. And you couldn't handle the behaviors that I generated as a result of my addiction. And I get it. But I'm hoping we can reconnect, because I miss you all. Now, if she's in a position to say that, that'd be one approach. Whether or not she's received or not does not depend on her.
Yes, hi. I was going to ask a relatively simple question, which is how would we address the tension between your findings of addiction, but also the fact that the optimal business model seems to be an addiction model from tech, pharma, media, religion. That is the optimal business model that can't be changed. So if they've got a lot of research to addict people, effectively combating what or using your findings. What do you think the best way to stay inoculated against all these new forms of addiction?
Well, you're quite right. And I mean, in the business world, workaholics are rewarded, aren't they? And cell phone companies and food companies do research on how to access the addiction-prone parts of the brain, including the child's brain. So they're gearing their profits on people being addicted. That's all true. So prevention of that or dealing with it is on different levels. If you're a parent, you better make sure that your child doesn't experience that inner emptiness that would have them turn to all that stuff. And other books of mine talk about that. As adults, I go back to what I said earlier, is that all we can do, not all we can do, but personally, the best we can do for ourselves is to become aware as possible. Is there some emptiness in me? Like, is there some emptiness in me that drives me to the internet to watch the same stuff on YouTube over and over and over again? Or compulsively has me do that? Then I have to deal with that emptiness inside of myself. So rather than worrying about the behavior, let me really take on that emptiness that's inside me, that void inside of myself. What is the source of it? How do I experience it? How do I relate to it in a conscious fashion? So it's maybe a pat answer, Neil, but consciousness, awareness, and that is daily work. When I don't do my yoga twice a day, I become less conscious. That's my particular, I'm not telling you should do yoga, I'm just telling you for me, it's daily work to stay conscious.
Thank you so much. I think we've got time for just maybe a couple more.
I wanted to ask you actually two things, but you can answer them in whatever order you want. So, because you talked about the sort of distant history of humanity and how much healthier the environment was. So, at what point do you think in human civilization do you think that we lost that environment? And a sort of short follow-on. On the topic of the sort of misattributed quote of saying that you should be the change you want to see in the world, what can we do to create, without wanting to take on the burdens of the world, what can we do as individuals to create a better environment for ourselves?
All right, what's interesting is that your questions in both cases contain their own answers. When you said at what point in civilization did we lose it? That was the point, when civilization came up. When we went from hunter-gatherer, small band, to agricultural, and civilization started to rise, that's when we began to lose that stuff. And it's been gradual, but steady and relentless ever since. So there are higher stages of technology and economic organization we reached, the more separated we became from our original selves. So that was the answer, right in your question, civilization. The question now is, can we re-embrace those values without giving up the benefits of science and technology and intellectual awareness and so on? I say that we can, but it'll take a lot of awareness, a lot of work. As to what you can do, again, you answered your own question, be the change that you want. And where you play that out depends on what your inclinations are and what your platform is. So in whatever platform you have, whether it's in the context of your family, community, extended family, political grouping, larger society, profession, manifest your awareness and teach it to those that are ready to listen at whatever level. And don't be attached to the outcome. If I was attached to the outcome that my medical colleagues should all of a sudden embrace what I'm talking about, and believe me, at times I thought all I have to do is say the obvious and they're going to say, oh yeah, he's right. No, they're not. So I've let go a long time ago of that kind of attachment, and everybody should. It's not about the end result, it's about the process.
I'm just trying to go through as many of the screens as possible. There's so many of you out there, and I want to be able to kind of ask as many, get your questions in. We've probably got time for one more.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this has been great. Thanks both. I just wondered, I'm in America where the disease model of addiction is primary, and I've been in recovery myself for drug and alcohol addiction. I have other addictions as well. I just wondered what your view is on abstinence and moderation when it comes to addiction. I know it's a big question, but out here, you know, abstinence is really seen as the ultimate goal. So yeah, your view would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so again, a deep question very quickly. Abstinence is a goal, but it's not the goal. It's a legitimate goal, but it's not the goal. The goal is sobriety. And you can be abstinent without being sober. Abstinent means simply you're not doing something. That's good. That's good. But it's not sobriety. Sobriety is actually full awareness and being in touch with yourself. That's the ultimate goal. Number one. Number two, while abstinence is a legitimate goal, it can't be the immediate goal for everybody. In the downtown east side, in Vancouver, we pioneered, for example, we had the North America's first supervised injection site. And I worked there as a physician, where people bring their drugs, even though they're illegal, and they get to inject under supervision. They're given clean needles, sterile water to inject with, and they're resuscitated if they overdose. This has been done in England, it's been done in Europe. Now, this is not abstinence because these people are not ready for abstinence. It's harm reduction. It reduces the harm because it means they're not using puddle water from the back alley to inject with, as some people did. And they're not passing HIV onto one another. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a good thing. So abstinence is a legitimate goal, but we don't define what the goal should be for individuals. We meet them wherever they're at. That's the whole point. And let me say one final thing here. You mentioned recovery. Well, that's a great word. What does it mean to recover something? It means to find it again. And it means that whatever you found again was never destroyed. You just lost sight of it. And if I asked you, and if I asked anybody, what did you recover? When you recovered, they'll say, I recovered myself. So that self is always there for you to recover. And everybody can be helped to do that. but it takes a lot of patience, understanding, and compassion, including for ourselves.
I think that is a very sort of much more a positive, sort of optimistic place to draw to a close. But it really is, it's wonderful to have so many of you with us, to see so many of you. It's a rare thing. And Gabor, thank you so much indeed for your wisdom and insight. We could go on a lot longer, but hopefully you'll come back and join us, and perhaps that will be when we can all be together in the same room. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.